In the news this week, astounding and abhorrent, Perth's top community leader slams federal plan to cap international students. An exclusive interview coming up.
Also tonight, second incarcerated teenager dies in Banksia Hill after committing self-harm, as calls for a new facility grow.
Lewin damaged, Perth's most loved boat smashed by container boat in Fremantle Port.
And celebrate brilliant designs. Perth Design Week to highlight best in artwork. And later, Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. The federal government's plan to cut international student intake is facing significant criticism, with one of Perth's top multicultural leaders saying international students are treated with disdain by policymakers. In his only interview on this matter, Multicultural Services Minister WA CEO Ramdas Sankaran called the capping decision astounding and abhorrent, arguing the inadequate government funding, not international student, is the real reason behind limited spots in nursing and healthcare courses. Paige Reid with this exclusive interview.
So what do you think about the government introducing this new cap for international students in 2025?
Decades ago, Australia was very altruistic when it established what they call the Colombo Plan, and they brought a number of students, mostly from different parts of Asia, with a view of providing them higher education here, but more importantly, that they would then go back to the countries from where they came from, and in many ways spook, Australia and Australian education, Australian resources, Australian industry, and both countries benefited from that particular plan, and more importantly, the students themselves did, because they didn't have to pay the sort of fees that they now are paying. International student industry is second only to mining, when it comes to the income that it produces for Australia. So when you are, to treat such an industry with such disdain by both sides of politics is absolutely unthinkable. This is a country that prides itself in fairness, in equity, in social justice. We throw all these, concepts around, but when it comes to the crunch, and particularly we saw it, during COVID, when, international students were excluded from both job seeker and job keeper programs. They suffered one hell of a lot. Their numbers dropped, and post-COVID, there's been a massive recovery. The students have come in such large numbers, and again, Australia has been benefiting hugely by such large numbers, and more importantly, they have been keeping many of our universities sustainable.
In terms of the cap, what effect do you think this is going to have for the universities here in WA from a multicultural perspective?
Look, I think it's going to be a massive impact. It's going to be a massive impact in terms of, the fee subsidization that they help. It's going to be, a significant impact in terms of, they play a fairly crucial role when it comes to, providing services, including agencies such as ours. We are a big employer of international students. And that's how, particularly in the community services industry, where many people have come, to study community services and other, allied health and professionals, they are suddenly going to be taken out of the equation. I mean, this can't be seen in isolation of the government's total migration program. They're actually winding down the rest of the migration program itself. Yes, both of this will have, obviously a beneficial impact on housing, but at what cost? I think they've been left high and dry, and as far as I'm concerned, it's absolutely not just astounding, abhorrent.
There's been a lot of talk over the years amongst university students between kind of domestic to domestic, saying that the international students take up a lot of the places in enrolment, such as nursing, healthcare, doctors. Kind of what's your take on that? And do you think this cap is going to greatly affect that?
Yes, you would expect it will have some impact there. I think the question we need to ask is, why is it happening? I mean, universities are not looking for international students just for the sake of them being international students. It is because they are paying a disproportionate amount of money for the same course that they are able to charge Australian students. And therein lies the conundrum, So it's not as if, somehow international students are, if I can put it bluntly, robbing Australian students of a chance to study there. If Australian governments, placed emphasis on Australian students getting these kind of degrees, they should be funding, the universities much better than they currently do. The problem is with the government, not with the, Australian or international students or indeed the university.
Do you believe that universities around WA are truly struggling with over-enrolment, and that might be the reason for the so-called cap? Or do you think they're actually under-enrolled?
I would be absolutely astounded if there is some such thing as over-enrollment. I don't have any concrete information. I suspect it is the other. Particularly when you're going through such harsh economic times, and the average HECS debt of students has been exponentially increasing. So I cannot see what you just said being the case. If anything, students these days are likely to either pause their studies or pull out because economic pressures are such that they will not be able to meet the HECS debt once they get the qualification and indeed find a job.
Western Australia is in shock this week after another death of the juvenile detainee at Banksia Hill Detention Centre. Premier Roger Cook confirms the 17-year-old boy committed self-harm, stating the death is tragic. With the election around the corner, it will be a burning issue for the government to resolve. Here is Peter Kennedy.
The latest death in custody in the West Australian Detention Centre is another tragedy. It comes on other tragedies that have already occurred. The government has promised to take action. However, the government has been slow in taking action and the problem persists. This is a major issue for Roger Cook and his government and his Minister Paul Papalia. They must act this time. And the question of Banksia Hill's the facility, its adequacy, has been asked for a long time now. Governments have prevaricated on it. They must come up with a solution. If it means the end of Banksia Hill and a new facility, then the government must move on it, and it must move quickly. And if the government continues with its policy without acting decisively, then yes, it will become an issue at the election, and possibly the Liberals could find a wedge within the government's proposal on Banksia Hill and come up with a better alternative. But the thing that's obvious now is that the situation as it applies is not good enough. Peter Kennedy, WAMN News.
Human rights activist and Indigenous advocate George Jatos also commented on the juvenile detainee self-harm incident this week. The tragedy marks the second juvenile death in custody incident in Western Australia following Cleveland Dot's death inside the notorious Unit 18 10 months ago. The opposition says WA's juvenile system has overwhelming issues and it must be resolved.
The next steps should be what should have always been the steps for this place to be rehabilitative, restorative, life transformative, to actually have redemption at the fore and the core and support these vulnerable kids who are our most vulnerable children that I've come across in my life or whatever, and I've worked with vulnerable all my life. So government actually has all the evidence. Nordic countries actually go a long way forward in actually showing the way of how to deal with young kids and turn their lives around and fortunes. These examples, why we don't follow them, is just unbelievable. That's all we need to do, just follow these examples and make these places restorative and life transformative.
It's got to stop. This has got to stop. Every single juvenile justice advocate in Western Australia has been telling the WA government that they've got it wrong. Every single time, successive premiers and ministers have been giving every one of us, and I add myself within that group, the single finger salute. And it's just not good enough.
The Australian Nursing Federation WA Secretary, Janet Ray, has confirmed her immediate resignation from the position. In a statement to the media, Ms Ray thanked ANF members for their support during her 2-year leadership. She stated that her decision to resign came after great consideration and that it has been a privilege to represent the members during one of the most tumultuous times in the union's history. She emphasised her achievements in negotiating a long stalemated public sector EBA, beginning the rollout of historic patient ratios in WA hospitals, keeping ANF fees at a record low, and fixing the helpline system. During the statement, she also expressed her gratitude to ANF members for their support. Ms Ray took over as Secretary of the Union following the resignation of Veterans Secretary Mark Olsen, who later became CEO of the ANF before announcing his retirement.
The Council have made a decision. I respect that decision. It wasn't my preferred option, but now that it is here, now that Council has made that decision, I threw my support behind another councillor, and she declined. She was very gracious, and she said that she wanted me to be doing the job. And I think the fact is that we've got a very important public sector EBA, because our nurses and midwives are still the lowest paid in the country. And I think Council recognises that I've done 9 or 10 public sector EBAs, and I've done 4 pre-election EBA campaigns. We need to do something about that.
A container ship, the Maersk Shekel, collided with the STS Lewin while entering Fremantle Port's inner harbour. The collision caused damage to Lewin's mast and superstructure, though its hull appears largely intact. The 332-metre vessel also struck the berth and a roof of the West Australian Maritime Museum, causing further damage. 2 crew members aboard the Lewin sustained non-life-threatening injuries and were taken to hospital. Fremantle Port's CEO Jody Ransom expressed concerns for their recovery. The incident is under investigation by the Australian Maritime Safety Authority and Fremantle Ports. At Container Terminal 3 on North Quay, and will remain there until further notice, with cargo operations currently suspended. Access to a berth and parts of B berth remains restricted as engineers assess the damage. The Maritime Museum remains open.
The annual Perth Design Week will return next year, with prominent Perth architect and former City Councillor Sandy Angie launching the event. Marking its 3rd year, the festival will feature more design work, artists and inspiring conversations around various kinds of design. There will be exhibitions at Perth's Buller Bartlett Museum, with partners including Curtin University, QV1, Central Park, North Metropolitan TAFE and the State Buildings. The event is set to be even bigger in 2025, and Ms Angie hopes to emphasise the importance of appreciating all kinds of artwork in daily life.
The clothes that you wear, the car that you drive, every object in your house, it's all been designed. And yet I think in Perth in particular, we're really focused on mining, and often we don't see the other things going on in our city. But design and culture are incredibly important. And when you look at the great cities of the world, you know, design and culture are fundamental to that.
And now here's Dr. Andrew Miller with his weekly medical and news commentary.
Hi, thanks for your time. You can probably see I've had a bit of a skin cancer nipped out of my nose there last week. Timely reminder that for those of us with particularly pale skin who've remember our childhood summers as being one sunburn, then peel, and then calamine lotion, and then recycle after another, that it's very important to get regular skin checks from your GP and to be acting on anything that changes on your skin and get that sorted out. These kind of seemingly harmless summers that we had as kids are perhaps coming back to bite us, and other things that seem harmless is doing a bit of gardening. So make sure you cover up and avoid the reflected UV as well when you're out on the water or down at the beach. Also, we got a warning this week from the Health Department about potting mix, which seems like a fairly innocent thing to be using in the garden, but a reminder that it can cause a particular type of Legionella infection, which can make you very sick indeed, severe flu-like symptoms, and needs some sort of treatment. So worth making sure that you wear particularly a decent mask. We learned about those during the pandemic and how they can protect our lungs. And in these circumstances also very effective to wear a well-fitted disposable face mask and gloves whilst using potting mix. Keep the potting mix damp is the advice, and make sure that we don't store it in the sun itself so that it's breeding those nasties. And wash your hands before you take your mask off after using it. These kind of things might seem like they're being a little bit overly protective, but as doctors we're used to meeting people who thought that things would be simple but turned out to be very inconvenient, affecting not just their work life and their home life, but also perhaps making them sick for the long term. So really worth just taking care of yourselves out there as we head back into summer. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Doctor. Now, speaking of Perth Design Week, I haven't been yet, but I am very excited to go next year, so I'm looking forward to 2025.
So do I, and in fact there will be more organisers, and in fact many people are coming on board. You just see the report earlier. I definitely would like to find out a bit more, because we all know that everything from the clothes that we wear, from the chest that we sat on, everything around us, even the houses that we live in, are designed properly, and there's a lot of intelligence in it, isn't it?
Yes.
So we definitely endeavour to find out, and of course bring you more stories as it comes. The event will be happening next year.
And now, here's what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thank you, guys. The top stories we're following on 6 News right now. The federal government is facing questions from within Labor about whether a planned question on gender identity will go ahead in the 2026 census after backflipping on their plan to dump a question about sexuality. Former Victorian Reason and Sex Party MP Fiona Patten to contest the Senate for the legalised Cannabis Party at the next election. And an ex-criminal banned from the Queensland State Parliament announces his candidacy for the seat of Cairns in October's state election. It's all happening. You can watch live 24/7 on the 6 News YouTube channel. For now though, guys, it's back to you.
Thank you very much. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wamnnews.com.au.
Remember to subscribe to the WAMN Extra News Club so we can continue our work in the community. Full details on wamnews.com.au/news/extra. From Melly, Peter and myself, wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.